What's up, guys, and welcome to the season finale of the Spoken Truth podcast. I go by the name of Danny,
I'm Chaz.
and today we're just going to recap what we've seen in the NBA Finals. We're going to look ahead into next season, and we're going to give you some preview of the upcoming NBA draft. Um, but first, let's start with the NBA Finals. We know that just wrapped up. We know this NBA season is officially over, with the Boston Celtics capturing their 18th championship in franchise history. Jaylen Brown was named MVP. He was also named Eastern Conference Finals MVP. And that team, who had a lot of pressure over the last couple of years, finally got that monkey off their back. Chaz, what were your overall impressions of the NBA Finals and the Boston Celtics winning their 18th championship?
Yeah, like you said, Celtics, record that record-setting 18th title. They've been on that journey for the last 8 years. Six conference championship appearances in the last 8 seasons. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have been knocking on the door for years and years, and they're finally able to get it done. A historic season, I thought. They finished 80-21, including regular season and playoffs. That's just, an incredible mark. Pretty much the best team in the league, wire to wire. Coming into this series, I think we both thought that the Mavericks had a chance, but they needed a lot of things to break their way, and that just didn't happen. The Celtics were not going to allow them to get into the game. We talked about how important it was for the Mavericks I'm sorry, for the Celtics to have leads going into the fourth quarter, and they did just that in 4 out of the 5 games. Every game that they won, they had a lead going into the fourth quarter. We also talked about obviously they need to keep Luka and Kyrie in check. They did that in 3 out of the 5 games. It's just a really impressive performance. I thought, Jason Tatum, him and Jaylen Brown are both highly scrutinized players. Tatum isn't quite one of the best players in the league, but he's kind of in that next tier. And because of that, he gets critiqued a lot, and a lot of the pressure falls on him. And then a guy like Jaylen Brown, phenomenal player, but he doesn't make All NBA. He doesn't get invited to Olympics. He's kind of pushed out. It seems like a lot of the time people don't really consider him one of the 15 best players in the league. I think he proved that he is during this playoff run, like you said, finishing that off by winning the Finals MVP. And, just the whole team in general, I thought it was really impressive. Obviously Drew Holiday, Derek White, Kristaps Porzingis, Al Horford. That top six is just really difficult to beat. And I think that's what weighed down on the Mavericks. They just weren't able to keep up with that team. And then, from top to bottom of the organization, Brad Stevens has done a phenomenal job putting this team together over the last several years after he went, from head coach to the president of basketball operations, trading Marcus Smart, trading Robert Williams, Malcolm Brogdon, a team that was knocking on the door, like we said. They needed a couple moves to kind of push them over the top, and they did just that by going and getting Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis last offseason. And then, a year later, they're on top of the world. They had the championship parade today. Like, I think this is something that we've been talking about ever since we've been doing this podcast and before about can the Celtics get it done? And years later, they finally do. And I think that's something that we have to celebrate. Like, even if you're not a Celtics fan, it's a really impressive thing to get there so many times and not let that failure get to you. I think that failure over the years is the reason that they were finally able to get it done.
Yeah, it's very rare that a team cracks the code in the beginning, like when their first
Yeah.
finals appearance, or in a long time the franchise haven't been to the NBA Finals, and a new regime of players get there. It's very hard to kind of crack that code. I mean, we've seen Golden State do it in 2015, with that core being together, their first finals appearance. I see them, they won it. That rarely happens in the NBA. LeBron didn't win to year seven. MJ didn't win to year seven. And so it's hard to win NBA championships, and that's why I never take it away. Even 2020 with the bubble with the Lakers, it's hard to win an NBA championship, no matter the circumstances, no matter if it's isolated or whatever the case may be. I can make the argument it's even a little harder being isolated, when they were at, when they won the championship in 2020. But a lot of people discredit that. I'm not one of those, individuals that would take it away. The Celtics, I mean, they were the best team all year. They were the best team all season long. And sometimes the number one seed don't win it all. And in this case, the last couple of years, we've had what, six different NBA champions. And so the lead is filled with parity. The lead, is filled with multiple teams that has a legit chance of winning it. We're not going back to 5, 6 years ago when it was Steph Curry versus LeBron over and over again. We're not seeing that. We're seeing different teams win every single year. We just saw Nikola Jokic win his first championship last year. Now we're seeing Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown win their first ring. And so would I consider them to, the favorites to win it next year? I wouldn't, me personally. I think what a healthy Milwaukee team, another year with Dame under their, under that system, under the belt, paired with Giannis, will have something to say about it. Whatever Philly do in free agency, whether they get Paul George or not, I believe a healthy Joel Embiid, they have something to say about it. The East is rather the easier conference. And so those are the top of three teams on top of the food chain. When you get to the West, the Denver Nuggets are still there. Another year with growth, with Karl Anthony Towns. What can the Timberwolves do? The Lakers are looking to rebound. They just hired JJ Redick. Congratulations to JJ Redick. He's the new coach of the Lakers. What is Golden State going to do? Will they stand pat? We're hearing a lot of stuff that Klay Thompson, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Could they be seeing a change there? Could they be interested in Paul George? Who knows? There's a lot going on, and you can't forget about the Clippers. So there's a lot going on in the Western Conference. But you can't take it away from the Celtics. This year is their year. Um, the NBA Finals, I would say personally, was probably one of the weakest I've seen in the last 6 years. The only one that's probably comparable to it is probably the bubble series. It they maybe. I think the NBA has seen a little decline in their finals ratings, their games, the series itself. Um, you can make a legit argument that probably the best finals, of the last 6 years was Milwaukee and Phoenix. And then you can make another argument that it was, the Warriors and Celtics. Those are the top two. Um, and so does the NBA have a problem with making new stars? And that's the topic that I mean that's the thing I said a long time ago is that we we want to see new stars, but do we really want to see new stars? Because we see viewership take a hit, we see interest take a hit when it doesn't involve Steph and LeBron. We see people kind of tune out, of the NBA finals. And we're basketball fans, so we watch it. Um, but those are questions that we have to continuously ask ourselves as the season and as these players get older and as we go into the off season, how can the NBA do a better job at making stars? Because we see that they're there, but as far as marking them, how can it become better for we don't get kind of a I don't want to say disappointing, but kind of an underwhelming finals like we did this past season.
Yeah, I've seen that discourse a lot that people were kind of disappointed with this finals. And I get that point, but I also kind of feel like that's the case maybe more often than not. I mean, last year I think you could have made the same argument with the Nuggets and the Heat series. I
Yeah.
think most of us going into that
Yep.
series felt like Denver was the better team, and the best Miami could do was probably get it to a game six or something like that.
Yeah.
And it ended in five, just like this season did. Obviously, you mentioned that Warriors Celtics series. I thought was a really entertaining series. Um, and as was a couple other series that we've seen in recent memory, like that Suns versus Bucks or the Raptors versus the Warriors in 2019 as well. Like those are good series, but they're not necessarily unforgettable series that we've seen in
Yeah.
the past. And there's a few different reasons for that. I think you made the point that viewership is down, and I think a reason for that is that we don't see the dynasties like we had last decade.
Yeah.
A lot of people seem to get bothered by the dynasties, by seeing the same teams over and over. The ratings don't reflect that. The ratings
Right.
always go up when you see the same teams rematch in the finals.
Yeah.
um I don't know. I think there's a couple of different ways to look at it. I tend to think that it's actually a good thing that we're seeing new teams win it every single year because, like you said, going into next season, I think the league is absolutely wide open. I think there
Yeah.
are a handful, 5 to 10 teams that probably are going into the season considering themselves championship contenders. And I think that's a good thing. I don't think that's something that we would have been able to say 10 years ago. In 2016, after we saw the Cavs come back to beat the Warriors, we were already talking about, them rematching in the 2017 finals. We saw that the next 2 years after that. Obviously, we saw that 4 years in a row. great series. That was an unforgettable run by those four teams. But I think it's a positive thing that we're seeing a new team every single year. Like you said, six teams, in 6 years in a row, we had a new champion. And a lot of these years, we have kind of an underdog make it to the finals. Last year, like I mentioned, we had the Heat, who were an 8 seed. This year, we have the Mavericks, who were a 5 seed. So even, you don't have a perfect regular season, you're not one of the top two, three teams in your conference, you still feel like you have a legitimate shot to get to the finals. As for this actual series, like you said, it wasn't the most entertaining series we could have gotten. I think 2 out of the 5 games were really, really good, and that was game two and game five. Game two, neither team shot very well, but both teams played really hard. It came down to the wire. The Mavericks had a chance to cut into the lead in the final minutes. And then, PJ Washington gets his layup blocked by Derek White and Jaylen Brown. And then
Mhm.
Jaylen Brown gets a layup on the other end to kind of seal that game. Game three, I think, was definitely the best game of the series. It was back and forth throughout the first half. Celtics were absolutely phenomenal in that third quarter, probably the best that they could have played. And then they go up, 20 points going into the fourth quarter. Somehow the Mavericks get back into the game. And it seems like they might steal it and get back into the series, but then Luka Doncic fouls out with like 4 minutes to go. And the Celtics are able to hang on. So those two games I thought were great. Obviously, game four and game five were blowouts, one way or another. And then, that game five was just kind of a culmination. I thought maybe the Mavericks would have a chance to win that game five, but I thought that they were going to have to, have a lead going into the fourth quarter. And
Yeah.
once Boston got that big advantage, I knew that the game was over. They were just a better team, and they proved that throughout the series. We talked about not only do the stars need to play at a high level, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, they definitely outplayed Luka and Kyrie. There's no question about that. But then also the role players were phenomenal. I mean, Drew Holiday, I think it was game two where he had like 26 points. Derek White had a couple of big nights. Obviously, Kristaps Porzingis with the 21-point effort in game one. He came out, really played really well in that game. So, I mean, it was a total team effort. Like I mentioned, those top six, in my opinion, is the best top six in the NBA. And I think that's something that we're going to see going forward. I forget what episode we mentioned it on, but it was a little while ago, that, a lot of these teams, they aren't they're led by their stars, but they need the other guys to play well, as well. And we saw that last year with the Nuggets. Obviously, Jokic and Murray were the catalyst behind their finals run, but they got a lot of production from guys like Michael Porter and Aaron Gordon and Bruce Brown and Jeff Green. Your 3 through 6 is almost as important as your top two. And I think that's something that we've seen over these last 6 years, that you need a complete team to win a championship. So I think that's kind of where the league is going, and I think the Celtics continued that.
Yeah. You make amazing points. I think for me is if you look back at since 2020, or sorry, since 2000, we're 2 decades plus. Um, the most watched NBA Finals was 2015. Since 2000, and that was featuring Steph and LeBron. That was the highest grossing finals of the last two decades.
Does that surprise you?
No, no, because I think it does a little bit. It's Steph's first finals, but the thing that I'm trying to get at is the anticipation, the build up to that finals.
Mhm.
The unanimous MVP season, the unanimous MVP award, and the way that he was playing up until the NBA finals
Right.
is why that it got the ratings, and plus LeBron being LeBron James, being at those two, the two faces of the NBA, the two best players in the world going at it, that means ratings, that equals ratings. So I mean, 5 of Steph's 6 finals are in the top 10 rated NBA finals of the last quarter century. The only one that's not rated that high is the one against the Raptors. So when we look at it, stars, superstars, and megastars equals ratings, equals finals. LeBron has been in some of the highest rating NBA finals in the history of the game because he's LeBron James. So when you start looking at things like that, when you start looking at it, how can the NBA feed off of that? You can't keep having these two same guys carry that torch
Mhm.
until they retire. And then we have the same issue where we're in right now, kind of where those two guys are not on good enough teams where the ratings in the NBA is plummeting. So you have to figure it out while they're still playing. But again, it is a good thing. It is a good thing to have parity in the NBA. It's a good thing to have different teams winning every single year. There's no quote unquote dynasties or super teams anymore. It's the era of the two man. You got two great players, you have a chance to win a championship. And so thinking about it like that, yeah, it makes sense for us to be happy that Boston won, and last year us to be happy that Denver won, and then the Golden State won, and then all these other different teams are winning championships. The Raptors won. All these different teams are winning championships, but how is it affecting the money that the NBA wants to make? And at the end of the day, all these owners care about is their bottom line. So what's going to be different next season when you're going to market these two same megastars again, and you're leaving these other superstars, the Anthony Edwards, the Jason Tatum's, the Lucas. You're leaving this next tier of superstars out of the picture. That's another year of them not being able to be thrust into that role. And so that's my point. I mean, the NBA does a fantastic job at marketing certain superstars, but they have to do even better at marketing the next generation. You can't keep focusing on the same two guys.
Yeah, and that's a conversation that we've been having, throughout this season. And I think we'll continue to going into next year.
Yeah,
I would
absolutely.
say that there are a lot of illegal streaming going on. These ratings, I think, reflect that as well. There are a lot of different factors going on. People are watching these on different streaming sites more now than ever before. So that's going to be a factor in those numbers as well. I do want to ask you, do you think the ratings would have been higher if, let's say, it was the Celtics versus the Nuggets opposed to the Mavericks?
I do think it would have been higher, but I don't think it would have been to a point where it's rated one of the top rated finals in this era.
Yeah.
Um, because of who's playing it. You know, there's no disrespect to Nikola Jokic and Jason Tatum by any means. There's no disrespect to those guys. But the NBA is not doing a good job at marketing those players. And so no matter what, LeBron, 30% of the NBA fan base cheer for LeBron, maybe more than that. The other half, the other 30%, maybe 25%, 40% like Steph. Another half might like Kevin Durant. Another half might like, Giannis. So you do a good job at marketing those guys, but you're not doing really a good job at marketing the others. And so I think that's where the problem lies. It's not that obviously the torch is being passed, but it's like in far as the NBA eyes, it isn't. But in the viewers' eyes and in our eyes, it was like clearly there is a new generation of stars, superstars on their way that are arriving before our very eyes. We just saw it this past season. Why are you not pushing those guys now?
Yeah, I mean that's a question that we're gonna have to see, and it might end up being that we don't necessarily see the league put their full force behind the other guys until LeBron, Curry, and KD have retired. And I think
Yeah,
at that point they probably would have missed the mark. I think they're trying to, but they're not necessarily pushing as hard as they did for those guys, 10 to 15 years ago. I will say that, we can get back to the finals real quick, and then we got other stuff to cover, but.
right.
I think this Celtics team, we've talked about six teams have won it over the past 6 years, six different teams. I think this Celtics team has just as good of a chance as anybody to repeat. I thought the Nuggets had a great chance this season. I think the Nuggets going forward will continue to be a contender, but I think the Celtics go into next season as the favorites, going in at least to get to the finals, if not win it all. I mean, this team is going to be back and loaded, and Tatum, Brown, I think they're going to play with even more confidence than they did this past season. We've seen it once you get that championship, you kind of go up a level just in terms of the way you carry yourself, the way you operate in clutch situations, because now you've done it. You know it. You as a team and as an individual have been there before, and you know that you proved to yourself that you can get the job done. I mean, a guy like Joe Mazzulla, I thought he improved so much from a year ago. We see he kind of got in his own way during that Miami series a year ago, and I think a year later he was one of the reasons that they did win the championship. I mean, you talk about what he did in this finals. I thought he outcoached Jason Kidd. I mean, I thought I noticed it immediately in game one. You know, he had Jason Tatum defending Daniel Gafford, and that allowed the Celtics to switch basically everything. I mean, Luka calling up Daniel Gafford to try and set a screen to try and get Jaylen Brown off of him, and he's got Jason Tatum switching onto him. So I mean, the Celtics were
Hmm.
just operating on a different level. I thought Joe Mazzulla was one of the biggest reasons. Like I said, Brad Stevens putting this team together over the last several years. And then obviously the players on the floor, you know, were just phenomenal. I thought Jason Tatum, his game five, um, obviously he ends up not winning Finals MVP, and some people might try and use that, you know, against him and say he's not the guy that people try and make him out to be. And part of that is that he couldn't get the job done. He, you know, he didn't win Eastern Conference Finals MVP. He didn't win Finals MVP. People are going to try and use that against him, but I don't think they should.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, and I don't think they should because Jaylen Brown was phenomenal and so was Jason Tatum. You know, Tatum's kind of struggled to shoot or in game one and game two, but I thought he was absolutely phenomenal in game five. He was in control of everything. He was the best player on the floor, you know, over guys like Luka, Kyrie, Jaylen Brown. He was the best player
Right.
on the floor in game five. Just absolutely making the
Did
right.
that surprise you?
It didn't. You know, I think Luka is the best player of, you know, out of the two teams, but on any given night, I think that Tatum and Brown can be that. And we saw that throughout the series. I mean, Brown was absolutely phenomenal. He kind of slowed down in the last couple of games, but him along with Porzingis, I thought was the reason they were able to win game one by so much. And then Holiday and Brown in game two were probably the catalyst. So I mean, it seemed like every game the Celtics had two or three guys that were kind of fueling their runs, while the Mavericks seemed like they were relying on one, maybe two. But for the most part, it was basically they were relying on Luka because Kyrie couldn't get anything going. So yeah, I was just really impressed by the Celtics on both ends of the floor. I mean, defensively, they were phenomenal. Kyrie could not get anything going in the three games in Boston, and Drew Holiday was the biggest factor in that. Um, yeah, like I said, I just thought this Celtics team, I thought they were vulnerable going into the finals. I said that I thought they could win it, but I was going to pick the Mavericks in seven. And I think you had the Mavericks in six or seven as well. And I mean,
Fix it.
yeah, they made us look like fools. I mean, Celtics jump out to that 3-0 lead, and at that point the series was over.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, Before we move on quickly, um, a lot of people want us to knock Luka for this performance. It happens to every superstar. Every person goes through one of these finals. Larry Bird had two games where he scored 8 points. LeBron had one of the biggest meltdowns of finals history.
Mhm.
Steph, the best shooting backcourt in NBA history, didn't score a point in 5 minutes. It happens to the best players in the world, best players ever. Jordan didn't have the. It took Jordan 7 years to get to the finals, and when he finally won, it took Steve Kerr hitting the shot to solidify one of his championships. It happens. Jordan didn't play well. It happens to the best. They all have a bad series, So we're not going to knock Luka, and I think we talked about it before the series started. If he had a bad finals, will we knock him? No, we're not going to knock him. Just like we're not going to knock if Tatum had a bad. Tatum had a bad finals in 2022, you know, and we just said he played bad, but we didn't knock him for it. His first finals appearance, they've been knocking at the door for a while. He finally broke through, finally got to the finals. He ran into Steph Curry. I mean, you faced a Steph Curry. Like, it wasn't you was facing like someone that was beneath you or whatever the case may be. Obviously, you had the better team, but the best player on the floor belonged to the Warriors, and that's why you eventually lost. If that was someone else, maybe you would have won. If that was somebody other than Steph, maybe you would have won. But we can't say that. So we're not knocking Luka for this performance. I am, however, is going to point the finger at Kyrie Irving because, sir, you've been here so many times. Disappointing. It
Yeah.
is disappointing what Kyrie displayed in the finals. Like, I don't know if because he was going back to Boston. I don't know what. The crowd got into it. He got into it with the crowd. He let the crowd take him out the game. But the biggest disappointment to me is Kyrie Irving in this finals.
Yeah, I think the crowd was likely a factor in that, but like I said earlier, I think the fact that Drew Holiday was the guy guarding was probably the biggest reason why he did struggle in those games. I
Yeah.
will say I'm not going to knock Luka, but because like you said, a lot of guys get to this point. This series actually kind of reminded me of the '07 Spurs versus Cavs. Obviously LeBron's first appearance in the finals, a transcendent player, but
Yep.
him and his team aren't quite ready while they're going up against, a complete team. That Spurs team was best team in the league and they were clicking on all cylinders. That kind of reminds me of what the Celtics look like. I'm not going to knock Luka because I think this is a learning experience, but in order for him to win a championship, he's going to have to get a lot better on defense. There's no doubt about
Yeah,
that. I mean,
absolutely.
this is something that a lot of teams do, and I was surprised that somebody like the Timberwolves didn't do it as much as I thought going into that series. But the Celtics just attacked him relentlessly. I mean, if he was guarding Brown, he was going at him. He was getting downhill. Even if this guy doesn't score, he's going to make the help come over. He's going to, obviously have the defense collapse, and then they're going to look to kick out. And they were just going at Luka over and over and over. Sometimes he would give more effort than other times. Obviously, like I mentioned earlier, when he fouled out in game three, that was a huge moment in that game, a huge moment in the series, because if they can win that game, you go into game four with a legitimate chance to tie the series. But he makes kind of a boneheaded play, fouls out with 4 minutes to go, and that comeback, they aren't able to get over the hump in there. So, I think Luka is one of the best players in the league. I think going into next season, he's probably the third best player in the league at worst. Obviously, he's an MVP candidate as he has been for the last several years. I do think at some point he is going to get over that hump and he will win a championship, but he's going to have to get better on defense. There's no doubt
That
about
was
that.
my next that was my next question for you because I do have a problem with the way that he acted as far as
Yep.
with the interaction with the refs and the lack of defense. He's going to have to get it extremely better,
Yep.
way better than what he presented on the floor this past finals. He has to.
Yep.
Maybe this was a learning curve for him to improve that. But I was going to ask you real quick before we get to go, kind of one word answer. Is it more likely that the Celtics repeat or the Mavs get back to the finals?
Oh, Celtics repeat. No, no doubt in my mind.
Okay.
How about you?
Really, neither. Neither, in my opinion. If I had to put money on it, I would say neither the Celtics repeat or neither the Mavs get back there. Um,
Yeah, I think that's a good question because both it's going to be difficult to do so, but I think the Eastern Conference being a little easier to navigate compared to the Western Conference, and the fact that there are a lot of kind of heavy hitters in the Western Conference around the Mavericks. Like I said, they were the fifth seed this year, so even if they're in that range, I think they'll have a chance to get back. But it's just hard to do so. I think they got a shot though. Luka and Kyrie, if they can continue to build that chemistry. Luka improves on defense. I think Derek Lively is a budding I don't know about superstar, but he is a budding star in this league, I'll say. He's going to be a really good player in, 2, 3 years from now. But I think the Celtics, if they bring back their top six, and can, add to it kind of on the fringes, I think they'll have a good chance to repeat.